So Broken Bow is an interesting town. As soon as he reminded me he was in Broken Bow, I said, that town stinks. Do you know how many head of cattle in that cattle guard west of town? Thousands. Thousands. We're saying that town stinks. That series was probably What Part of Go Don't You Understand? And another time, sometime after I was there, I was doing that series at a conference for missionaries at a font in Kansas City. And a couple came up to me that were from another far out place, War Road, Minnesota. If you go to where you're going north of Minnesota or Minneapolis, when you hit Canada, turn left. They're right on the line up there, War Road. And I did that series there on What Part of Go Don't You Understand. And later, years later, they are missionary for the bond. They said that was the message that prompted them to move out more for the missions. It's one of those things like you don't know until maybe years later. But it's nice to be with you again. Were any of you here when I talked last time? They just give me the easy topics. Last time I was on dealing with sexual abuse in ministry. So, I don't know. Last year would have been improving your balance, was pretty simple compared to this year's topic. I understand this to be an open Q&A. If you want to jump ahead to things that are involved in the topic, that's fine with me. My topic I don't consider to be quite as difficult as the person who's doing the one on worship and music. Oh man, yeah, you have my sympathies. Did you realize that the first worship scene in the Bible, there was a disagreement and one person got killed? Cain and Abel, they were off on the wrong foot right from the beginning. Aaron didn't do so hot with it. Later, David, the guy that wrote most of the Psalms, he didn't do so hot with it either. And today, it's still rolling on. But anyway, look over your notes that you sent out. That's a good topic to address. But questions that you have, and if we run out of questions, I want to talk to you a bit about disciple making and electronic resources that are available at the ideal price of free, that are very effective, contemporary, current releases on materials that you can utilize as disciple. So who has questions? Oh, that's not raising your hand. At an auction, you would have just bought that bit we were bidding on.
Maybe you could give an overview of your subject. I just seen in the notes what it is, the title of it, but usually get a Q&A after you hear this week.
I know.
But maybe just give us an overview of.
Yeah, you'll get that wrap up again tonight, but a few months ago, I got an email from Doug, and I was supposed to come last year and do Improving Your Balance. He said, you want to do that online on Zoom? I said, no, because I had these interesting illustrations on balance, and I thought it'd be more fun to do live. And he said, in light of what's going on today, do you think that topic is as relevant as it was a year ago? And then he listed out several things, like, racial situation, social injustice, political upheaval, COVID, just minor topics to deal with. And approached me about dealing with it in a way that I'm not taking sides. He said, we've already had enough of that, and keep taking sides. But how do we respond to this? And I ended up with a longer list. I'm trying to think how my material progresses, but I think it's tomorrow morning. I'm going to go through quite a list of things just to raise your awareness. How many of the different dynamics are that we're dealing with? We do live in a very challenging time. Now, I'm a child of the 60s. I remember we thought those were days of turmoil. But now, this is just unbelievable because with all the specific things we might look at, we get down to the underpinnings of it all. And I said this for the first time publicly last Monday at a funeral of all places, that we no longer live in a postmodern world, we now live in a post-truth world. And that is definitely the case. I'm going to deal with that some more, teach a new word. I'll teach you the word unfalsifiable. And I read that one and it's like, oh my word. But the thing that's really impressed me with this, and I can say it again today, this topic is so contemporary. I told Doug this, I told my friends about it, this topic of we're dealing with, so contemporary that contemporary is not in the sense of is it 21st century, or is it 2021, or is it, April? No, it's what time of day is it? That's how rapidly these things are hitting us. So I've said this to my friends, and that's why I have so many friends praying for this meeting, these meetings this week. And every day I find new illustrations. So let me give you the one that brought it with me just in case I had not to share it, so I got the stats and everything correct. But the area of dealing with race issues. I have a friend named David Hansen, just had an interesting conversation with the person who's not his brother, different David Hansen. He's CFO of a financial institution, and one day he was going over some things with us. He showed us the income disparity between blacks and between whites. And we've known about that for a long time. Now, as I've got going on this topic here, some things I already knew about, I started delving into it in a lot deeper way. And it's very interesting to see this thing called generational wealth. Now, I looked online to see what the house we lived in Denver in the late 60s was selling for today. And $565,000. It was not a great house. And I was stunned. And I started thinking about this. When my mom's parents died, who were immigrants, Germans from Russia, who settled north of Denver, her share of the estate was maybe $200. When my mom died, the share of estate from my two brothers and myself was, I think it was much more, over $40,000. I don't know, but it wasn't that. Like 15, 20, but more than what she did. I looked at with my financial planner the other day where we are, and I think, what's going to happen to my kids when they die? So much different. Because the way you develop generational wealth is through owning property. Especially right now, you're a property guy. Ever. Well, then you back up and you go back to the 50s in particular, start to read about redlining. Where there'd be lines put around neighborhoods where the banks would not provide loans for people living in those areas. And those were the areas in which predominantly black people lived. And as a result, that generation, like my mom and dad, were not able to get loans to build generational wealth. And a sub thing to that is interstate highways were in some cities mapped out according to the red line districts. You actually ended up with a highway between the black area and the white area, which adds up to an article that I read about, since those were the areas where they wouldn't loan money, and those were the areas that were the poorest part of town to live in, those are the parts of town that are most likely to flood. And you watch this thing that comes bouncing down through, but the thing I read today, there is a difference between the economy and stock market. I'll touch on that a little bit in what I'm saying. And people that have invested money in stock market, they've seen, stock market do pretty well. I was stunned. One group I work with, in the first quarter of their investment, they gained $30,000. Oh, and just my financial advisor calls me up for trying to retire one of these days. When you're in the faith-based nonprofit world, a retirement plan, I know, eternal. But in the meantime, and she says, hey, your investments have done really well. But if you're at an economic level where you don't have those investments, well, they started looking at millennials. And at millennials, they found, a few years ago, they weren't doing so hot on how they were accumulating wealth. And they wanted to see what happened. And things really took off over the past year even, where the white millennials now typically have about $88,000 accumulated in wealth. Black millennials have about $5,000. And you hear those things. And what I think is hard for us is to totally relate living in that context. I grew up in a racist town. I read recently, I've been reading a lot over the past 3 months, believe me, that our town was trying to breakout of Jim Crow, and I got thinking about that because our elementary school, when I say our elementary school, we did have a few blacks there. They were classmates, even though we were close to where the blacks lived in town. But as I was reading the article, it also started talking about the swimming pool, because I used to go to Greenland. That was the swimming pool. Whites only. You were supposed to have a membership. We never had a membership, but we were whites. We just had to pay for it. And then they built a swimming pool near the black area of town. But that didn't happen until a 14-year-old black boy died swimming in a creek. And they then decided at that point that I should turn off my cell phone. Should be calling me. And I was talking with my niece, who's a little bit younger than me, and she talked about their nickname for the black swimming pool was the Inkwell. And I think about the area the blacks live, the housing project called Farley Square. We didn't call it Farley Square. There was a different word that was used to describe that area, literally down by the railroad track, down by where the black elementary school was. One day, I used to enjoy going to the main cemetery in our town, because it was great going back to the Revolutionary War. When you come in the front gate, there's a circular area, and that's where the Civil War dead are buried, and there's a statue with the Civil War soldier on top of it. And my senior year in high school, was that the year I was living pretty close to the cemetery, I just had to go and read the inscription on it, and the inscription for that statue was dedicated in honor of Sergeant Farley, who was the last surviving Civil War veteran from our town, who was a member of the colored troops. Colored troops. Like housing project. But if you were to take Sergeant Farley and look it up on Bing, I use Bing instead of Google. If you look up on Bing, this little box is going to come up with a quick thing. It's going to have a picture of that statue. With this comment, the statue dedicated to his army in his honor was inexplicably painted white some time ago. So all I can ever remember is that soldier being a white man. Monument dedicated to black man. And as I was driving to fly here, I was reading a book by Don Lemon. Lemon is a CNN commentary person. I was intrigued. He wrote a book called This Is the Fire, which is a build off of a James Baldwin book that's greatly influenced him as he. And he has this part where he tells about the death of his sister. He said, when a death occurs, and he has this amazing paragraph describing the emotions we go through, and we get that phone call, totally unexpected. And he said, we can know that's what it's like getting that phone call, but when the phone call comes to you, all of a sudden it's different. And he basically then says, so here you are reading about this, and I'm trying to explain it to you. It's when it comes home to you that it really changes you. So my daughter started dating a guy, and then she got engaged. They were planning to get married, and in those years, that little time between proposal and marriage, one of the things they talked about was adopting transracially. And initially they were thinking about adopting somebody from Vietnam. My daughter had a particular interest in that. So they got married, and interesting story, they then started a number of years of infertility. But they still pursued that adoption. And that's how Stephen and Michelle came into our life. Stephen was born, they were still in the process of doing the paperwork, and Stephen's mother had already decided that it would be Margaret or Beckett that would place her son into their home to be raised. 22, and this was her sixth child. Stephen came. Following year, December, when they actually brought Stephen home, it was born late November, the following November, birth mom contacted the agency again and said, I'm pregnant again, the baby's due in December with family. Now we have 2 African-American grandchildren. Then father's added 3 more kids to the family. They've got 5 kids. Michelle is now 12 years old, and she's got the fun mouth on her. didn't have surgery. She's at the doctor's office getting a follow-up to the surgery, and they're asking her questions. They said, do you have any headaches? And she said, we have 7 people living in our house, and we have headaches all the time. And we just love what she does. And Stephen changed his name. He wants to be called Amari, which means warrior. Stephen is 13 and a half years old. He's 5'9", at the beginning of dreads, muscular kid, athletic. Here's their house where they live now. Right behind their house is the school he attends. But because of security, he has to walk all the way around and come in the front door over there. He has already been over home by the police. See the difference that story makes? When the 16-year-old girl was shot and killed in Columbus, Beckett. Very often. Since I got back from what the terms they have for something we might not identify. Right about black, we taking the trash out well. Which in LA, officers are responding to domestic call. They're on their way there. They see this black man come out of this house with his trash can to enter his trash. They pull over. They arrest him. They take him to jail. The domestic abuse situation was 2 blocks away from them. And they had no description that it was even a black man. It was nothing to go on. They just see a black man taking the trash out in front of his home. Arrested it. And it's hard for us with these things. And when we get into this cultural clash that occurs, this is the thing I want to talk to you a lot about. How build these relationships where we can hear each other. This week, I'm not going to tell you what to think about racism, but you know, it is one that does hit pretty home to me. Or about COVID controversy, or about social justice. But we're going to take the Word of God, not at this level. We're going to bring it below brain level, under our hearts, to where it really affects not just what we know, but what we actually. I started teaching motorcycle safety course. Do a lot of walking backwards. You know why? You have a new rider on a running Harley Davidson, you don't turn your back on them. About a third of my walking, I'll do 8,000 steps during a one-day training, is backwards. I'm at the store buying shoes that feel comfortable walking backwards. Like, what are you doing? I said, oh, yeah, walk backwards in these shoes. And you know, we teach them things. We say, now listen, if you put in the clutch, it removes the power to the rear wheel. If you roll on the throttle, okay, that's going to increase power to the rear wheel, so if you have a problem, just pull in the clutch. And I'm out there with my part of the group, and the other right coach with his part of the group. All of a sudden I hear this motorcycle roar, rev up, and I look over, and here's this guy on the second exercise we're doing, which is power walking the bike across a flat, in a straight line, shooting down, you know, just that, and unfortunately as governor, they can't get going over 20, 25 miles an hour. Also, I hear this roar, see this guy flying down through there, then he goes across the cement berm out around our training course, past the picnic pavilion, and then this motor finally stops. He accidentally did this, but this had not become a normal reaction. He got off the bike and looked at the other rider coach and said, this is for me. We were like, thank you, Jesus. The light has dawned upon this guy. But in adult learning, there's 3 stages. The one is where you become aware of something. The second is where you understand it. And the third, in the literature I read most recently, is when it becomes autonomous, where it's automatic. Habits are things that we do without thinking. And I found after 10 years, I just started riding a motorcycle about 10 years ago. After 10 years of motorcycle riding, things have become so habit to me that in training to be a rider coach, I had to stop and think, oh yeah, that is what I do, isn't it? And when we read the Bible, we can get the information, that's what the Bible says, and we can interact with it, But it's taking these things down to a different level where that then is something we don't have to think about because that is just, I want to take some passages that will be familiar to you and I want to try to push them down. I know. I live with this for three months. My wife will be happy when this week is over. Because every day I get new illustrations. Next question.
That's a really a different place. So imagine, because we already heard that word woke, means something different to you. And it's not necessarily a pejorative. I don't know if there's a question or, but I think there is.
Yeah, there is.
And we can't all experience the same thing. So here's the question. How do we wake up with being woke? Or a lot of white folks. How do we wake up to understanding what other people are going through? We can sympathize.
It is the focus of tomorrow morning. Oh, really is. That really, you've just said that tomorrow morning went up. I'm going to kind of leave that there. But okay, so I've got this granddaughter, which caused me to look at some other things and encounter some. I became part of the Patriot Riders. They're the ones that, when there was a military funeral, if a Baptist church from Kansas, West Baptist Church, was going to show up, these bikers would show up. And they would position themselves between the family and the protesters. I joined Patriot Riders for the purpose that if they ever showed up in my neighborhood. But we never got to do that, or never got to do that. But we live near Gettysburg. The only involvement that the colored troops had at Gettysburg come in here. And there are no colored troops buried in National Gettysburg. Actually, for one of the big commemorations, none of the colored troops were invited back to the city of Harrisburg and had a commemoration just for the. The Eagle Scout working on the project knew there were 3 graves on a farm not far from his house, and he started to investigate it and had the GAR symbol still of the graves, the Grand Army of the Republic. The Eagle Scout went on this process of identifying who these 3 men were and who their descendants were, and ultimately a reburial of those 3 at the National Cemetery just north of Harrisburg. That's the one my daughter and I went to. Reburial of 3 colored troops on the floor. And as we got out off the motorcycle, this woman got out of the car and she was in totally, period dress from the Civil War era, a black woman. And we got talking with her, and she confirmed a story that I had heard. If you're ever in Gettysburg, give me a call, I'll give you the tour, okay? Here's Pickett's charge. You've got this section where there was like a mile-wide white mass of gray uniforms came out of the woods and started across that area known as charge. And the idea was, we're going to make them think we're going to attack here, we don't make them think we're going to attack here, and then we're going to hit right there. Well, a whole bunch of reasons it wasn't going as Lee had hoped. But there's this one part of that line that's referred to as the high water mark. The tops of trees, yeah. That was 12 acres of land owned by Abram Bryant. 3 black men.
There's a picture of him holding the rifle from the burial house.
And for a while, there was just this little white house there. But this woman is a direct descendant of Abram Bryant. She said that as we were growing up, we remember this story and tell this story. And she stayed after the National Park Service, and now there's a plaque that tells the story of Abram's wife. And the day I took my two grandkids there, the house was open and they had people explaining the story of Abram's wife. And it's like, this is amazing to hear these stories. And as a result of that, some other things, with getting ready for this, where I read the book, The Color of Compromise, I learned a lot about the United Daughters of the Confederacy. So if I take you down to Gettysburg, I'm going to show you my favorite statue. It's the one from North Carolina. I say, do these images look familiar? And they'll look at it for a moment. I see it's the same sculptor that did Mount Rushmore. And I'll take you around and show you the inscription. This was placed there by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. And you'll read about how these were brave men, basically died for the cause. And their cause was noble. And then you start to study about the United Daughters of the Confederacy. Stone Mountain in Georgia, the initial planning for that involved the United Daughters of the Confederacy and the Ku Klux Klan. And the dedication of Stone Mountain, when it was finally completed, was 100 years to the day after Lincoln died. Come to Gettysburg, I'll take you to a monument. I think it is that North Carolina monument. It was dedicated on July 2nd, 1965. 100 years to the day after the second day of the battle. And the dedication speaker was George Wallace, the governor of Alabama. Then you start to read about how the United Daughters of the Confederacy wrote textbooks that were used in the schools. You expand your knowledge and you start to expand your understanding. And I know it's the other thing I've looked at is racism. I think, because of my grandkids, I try to understand. And this is our chapter. Then I go back and I see Paul can stand there and quote their poets. But he's reading things that he wasn't reading the commentaries from Luke. Okay. He was reading their literature so that he could understand where they were coming from. You find that ability. I think that's a good part of it. It comes down to our response. I go to my hometown now, I look at my hometown differently because it's through different eyes about Black part of town, Black swimming pool. Story of the Black woman drowning in the 37 flood, holding up her baby, and a white fireman able to rescue the baby, but not able to rescue Black community knew that story, but the white community didn't know it until about years ago. And you move over to some of these other things and try to understand social justice. But the COVID controversy, what's happened there? My biggest grief regarding the COVID con been how pastors are unbelievable. But at our church, we go to a large church. You got the lower level, the aisle across there, and then this level goes up. That Sunday morning, the pastor said, today's our annual meeting. It's like 5:30 in the afternoon, and the former pastor, the last thing I want to do is go to that. It's just like, been there, done that. Let me show you the scarf for one in second degree. As I don't go to them. But my friend who was there, a guy that I do one-on-one seminar making with, and he said it was the biggest crowd he'd ever seen at a church business meeting. And just as it was about to start, this group comes in unison, together, and they go all the way up to the back row, sit down, take their nap. That's what required for this. But they wanted the pastor to know. They didn't. So I looked around and the sad thing for me is some of those were leaders. Kind of the good thing was, the pastor sitting in the front row, he didn't see him come in and take off their mask. Then when he stood up, the light were in his eyes, he never saw them. But afterwards, somebody said they were there. Occasionally in a sermon, you just tell that the one sermon, he's like really straightforward about it. We made this decision as a group, as the church. We're meeting outside, no further notice. All outside, unless it rains. But it's just how we handle these things in the body of Christ. think people are going to leave churches. A friend of mine, he just went off the elder leadership team of his church. He asked me to pray for him specifically that he would get over his attitude for the people that caused so much trouble for the godly man. And I don't know this person, but one of the younger men that just went on elders at his church. Right then, the COVID thing started up, and he said that his friend is the guy he one-on-one with, and that my friend said he wishes he'd never become. Contrary that is, or in contrast to, as far as being elders, as far as I'm looking forward to being here with you. Despite the fact that I'm sadly glad that it's over. My wife will be, because every day I come out of my study going, here's more, here's more.
One other question, because this is, in your experience, this is about blacks, the generational wealth that they have. But what about Native Americans? That's kind of the same thing. Yeah, they have treaty rights. Never been. You look at a lot of reservations.
I was flying here. I was thinking especially about that, and I can't remember the name of the person from flight staff that's still there. I was asking him some questions in the hallway, just a few minutes. As I was flying here, I was thinking about what I've read on go back to COVID. I was thinking reservation and on the dynamics of alcoholism, the effects that's had. But also the aspect, I remember a report where children on the reservation, when it's like they had to do their homework and involve the internet, the hotel parking lot, Wi-Fi. Okay, that was when you talk income. Area that I have not read in as much. That's why I take what my experience is here on racing, and I start to expand it out. This one about this. I hit a bump in my ministry career, and I'm at that age where we're going to hire somebody that age. And we coded well in the church. We're looking for young pastors, us kids. Looking for a pastor who's going to be here for a long time. And so I ended up selling used cars. And think about it, probably everyone in this room thought used cars people are important for our society. Give us a break.
Amen.
Some of us are off. There's some. Buy here, pay here, I have no respect for. Okay. And I move into the secular workforce. If I hadn't done what I did, selling for used cars and selling Harley Davidsons, I couldn't be doing what I'm doing in the Christian businessman's connection. But the past, I never clue what it's like. And the number one thing that really hit me when I went into working at used car sales for a national corporation, for CarMax, after a few months or so, I realized I now had more gay friends than I'd ever had in my life. And I remember one day we had this awful snowstorm, and so it's like all hands on shovels, and we're out there, and they decided we shovel out the maintenance area first, and the mechanics work. And I'm shoveling, we're shoveling it in pickup trucks, so we have pickup trucks, and we drive them off, and them out somewhere else, neighbor's lawn. But we're shoveling, and next to me is this woman worked in the business office, and her wife worked there also. And at one point, we were talking about something, and I went, wait, don't tell me. And she stopped shoveling, and she just stared at me. And she said, you listen to NPR? But she had been pegged as a conservative Christian. Sure, I would listen to NPR. And then I go to work at Harley, and I was riding in and listening to WITF on the radio and on NPR this morning. They said, and the guy said, you listen to National Propagation Radio? So all of a sudden, this dynamic, but Joe and I were talking about this just before I left, because the last person we saw in hospice about 2 weeks ago was a woman, And that partner. What my wife does with home care, she's presented with a particular person. There's this other relative, and we know the story, we know the history. Suffered. Here he is as an older man whose partner died within the last year. He has basically no family. Never thought about what happens to their partner died. They have no, maybe the family they have has problems. Then I talked to co-workers of mine who was telling me about his daughter lives with a partner. Family members said, you know, if your daughters come to the family reunion, bring your partner along. And some of the dynamics that they work with, or expanded out Muslims. I've spoken positively about witnessing the Muslims, and on my Facebook page when I posted something one day, a friend of mine, a believer, who believes in Christ, posted on my Facebook wall, "Aren't you afraid they'll behead you?" And I've had people say that to my face, "Aren't you afraid they'll behead you?" My personality, my response is, well, it hasn't happened yet. But the organization I used to be with has developed two evangelism kind of courses that are heart, soul, and mind focused. The first one I took was on witnessing the Muslims. And I was so impressed with it, I then sponsored it at our home office and invited the community to come in. There's a crisis pregnancy center in Harrisburg, closed their facility, all their staff except one, they want to leave someone at home, came to that seminar. Because every week they were having Muslim women come to the crisis pregnancy center wanting help. They said, we need to learn how to. Now, we had a former staff member who worked with Muslims. She was over in Africa, not Africa, well, Africa, in Egypt, and now it's down in Florida. And I mean, she's welcome inside mosque with everything. But the first time I took the training, she was there, and she comes dressed as a Muslim. And is there, and just then later they introduced her. Well, we were bringing her in also. So we had this really good resource. It's kind of expensive on Islamic outreach. And I said, well, why don't we make it a giveaway? The first person that talks to her will get that book. We're at a missions headquarters. We have 80 people there. One woman with a hijab on. We almost didn't give away the book. Wow. When she finally sat down at the table, a friend that I had invited who came down from the Dearborn, Michigan area, because that's the largest Islamic population, spoke to her on the book. How sad was that? And at CarMax and at Harley Davidson, if I saw somebody come in, they might be. I remember one Muslim lady saying to me, are you a follower of Islam? I said, I'm a follower of Islam. And I don't think you use the Holy Book for you as well. I said that to an Uber driver out in California. He said, oh yeah, you can't be a good Muslim, I believe. This is my sad statement. I find it easier to find common ground with a Muslim than I do with someone. Now the organization put together a second program. They've not taken yet, but they did allow me to have a work program on how to witness to people that are LGBT. And have to care for. So glad one of the guys, one of my preteens, was the year before COVID. He actually invited a Muslim to come to Thanksgiving dinner for his. And the shocking thing is he didn't get to heaven. All these Turks did. And he's sitting there with other guys around the group, and I've got a couple really far right evangelicals in that group, and he talked about what a great experience it was.
This kind of struck me in family sense, and I'm amazed at how quick it happened. 30 years ago, my sister got pregnant, and Steve, a black fellow, and we're all from Chicago, it really affected my dad. My dad just kind of walked away, so him and Steve asked me to stand up at their wedding. And my niece, she's carrying my niece Jessica right now. So Steve became a best friend. 10 years later, he gets fired from Pizza Hut as a manager because somebody accused him of breaking in the safe, taking the cash. Well, that was false. But he got fired, lost his job, and that carried around for him. And he never really had a decent job since. I mean, he had a business degree, and that forced the marriage to break up. But everybody stayed good friends. Steve's a good friend of mine. Last year, his daughter, my niece Jessica, got really heavy, and not only just heavy into the BLM, but she's one of those outspoken voices out on the street corner, you know. And my Facebook page is not political. I wouldn't put anything up on it. And her and Steve got very angry with me, distanced from me, and won't even go to family reunions or Christmas dinner together. And I just don't understand. I mean, I stood up at their wedding. I loved them, befriended them, and now because I'm an old white man with white hair, I'm out the door, and I just don't understand how quick that happened.
It's confusing. Personal story, and I don't want to take this wrong, okay, but you probably will, but I've got a plane ticket to go home. My brother is very, well, he is, I just barely believe that, very much against extremely, I mean, to the extreme. I mean, there's people that voted for Trump, and then there are people that are extreme. And when he talked about seeing Trump live, my wife and I are sitting there, and you would have thought, Jesus. And he came. That kind of resource, isn't it? No. And I mean, I'm not saying Trump was totally wrong. I'm just saying my brother is like, it was worship. His daughter is a gay pride march lesbian. That relationship with both of them. The other day I called Rick. That was great. That's who's Rick's had a heart issue. They're filling in. Phone, and I called his daughter. Now, I don't call his daughter very often, so typically when I call her, she answers the phone, says hello, and I say, nobody died. That's where it starts out. This time she answered the phone, she said, hello, Uncle Tony, and I said, what's up? I said, you know why I'm calling? She goes, yeah, Gregory. And I thought, isn't this interesting, and with both sides, actually easier, means conversation to talk about what's like. So we built a relationship. It's remarried, married a Jewish man, so she celebrates Hanukkah. It's kind of interesting. Got a great relationship. 4 years old. I'm back in the Harley world. I did that intentionally. For a year, I'm in my basement zooming everywhere. I'm not around people that are unsaved. I'm just on my computer basis. I saw that they were looking for motorcycle safety coaches. Went up to see my wife, of my 13-step commute from the basement to the first floor. And I told her about being a motorcycle safety. Why would you call? Called me $375 to get trained. If I teach $100 to get back, I'll take a while. And 3 weekends of intense training. Second weekend of there, one of my coworkers, I told for Harley's program. We're walking across the parking lot because the building is where the flush toilets are. The fitness pavilion doesn't have any. And in between us is a guy just retiring as captain of for Delta Airlines. And I've never met the captain before, and he's just getting to know Bob. And we're walking across the I had sensed the guy between us. By the time we get close to where I was working that next, I just think if I get a reaction out. Hey, I'm back in the third world. You know. But then he and I had lunch together last Friday. I got kind of confusing because we were at the dealership and buying from the food they served during nice weather. The next time, let's meet somewhere. And his mom went through 2 strokes. I've been praying for him for years. I called mom the other day, had a great conversation with her, you know, and this last week, I mean, he made a very religious speech. He said, actually, I'm Lutheran, you know. But Good Friday week, on Monday, Thursday, we were closing up from teaching and walking across there, and there's a code I had memorized, and it included the sequence 911 in it. He said, that was a tragic day in American history. I said, well, do you realize the worst day in history and the greatest day in history were just 3 days apart? And he goes, that. Not Good Friday and Easter. Well, next day, Good Friday. We're walking along. And I said, hey, I have a Good Friday story to tell you. He goes, okay, make sure so we got together, and I said, yeah, I moved to Michigan to pastor church up there, and my first Good Friday there, I pulled a friend that I got to know, and we were going to go play golf. The only place I ever asked for a pastoral discount was at the golf course. We went in, and Steve's the guy, I got to meet him there, got to know him pretty well during my time in Michigan. And, you know, I said, do you get a clergy discount? And Steve looked at me on Good Friday at the golf course. Yes. Okay, so he gave me the discount. Well, we played 9 holes, that's all Terry and I were playing, and Terry, as we're playing golf, he's thinking about it. He realized Steve charged him for the discount too. So Steve went back in and Terry went back in, hey, Steve $5, and I owe you $5. And Steve goes, what's this for? I said, I'm clergy. Where'd you go, clergy? I don't know this. Next week we come back to play golf on Friday again. It's not a Good Friday, it's a normal Friday. And you know, hi Steve, clergy? Yep. Terry goes, hi Steve, I'm not clergy. He was a great conversation, one clergy. We started a golf fellowship on Friday morning. Sometimes we had 3-4 such 12 golfers. Ever was with me at clergy discount. Because one day, Steve had the honesty to hand back $5. I gave that, we call it in CBMC, we call that a raising flag story. Here's where my faith made a difference. We also put a stone in the person's shoes, just saying something that's kind of like, you know, you say something like that, you know, and it's enough to raise curiosity. And now to see, you know, we're to a point with Bob, and you know, I've been doing this for years, just had patience. But here, we went to a funeral, of a person related to the dealership, and I remember this one woman give me a hug as we're walking away. John goes, who's that? I was like, well, that's so-and-so. But John knows that these are people that I've connected with. Great difference. And you're going to hear this quote from one of the sessions. If the food lacks salt, not because of the neglect of the food. If the room lacks light, it's not going to be because of the neglect of it. So, someone raising your hand. Waving. I think you can see burden in my heart. When I got involved with bikers, when I started riding a bike, my midlife crisis came kind of late. I'm at the mission, I'm taking a class on cross-cultural communication, cross-cultural mission. And all of a sudden I'm realizing when you talk people groups, bikers are people groups. You have their own language, you have their own code. The United Methodist Church is getting ready to have a bike blessing. It's got you, and then whatever the city is, and me, MC. They put that on the back of a jacket, put the name of that town. They're going to be pagans. But the pagans are the dominant group in our area. When you put MC back there in that city and you're on their turf, you will get pulled over. And a good chance you'll beat down, and I'm not exaggerating at all. I joke about that. If you want to, we're in CBMC. If you want to meet pagans, put CBMC and then put Pennsylvania and go right down the road. But that's the culture. But across the ground is level around the bike. But getting out there, building these relationships, and that's where we're going to be Thursday night and moving forward in our life.
I know there's a question as to that. What is the proper, the big thing we hear, the buzzword is white supremacy. There's much of us here in this room are caught in the middle of that. It's just feel like one of those. I'm sure you've had that issue with them. What is a good relationship? What is how do you deal with that? Not being racist, but being accused of being racist? So, how do you deal with that issue? I'm just curious. Maybe it's rehab of what you just already said,
But as soon as you started into that, I thought about, we'd like to have a CDNC ministry in the black community in Harrisburg. But for me to go in and try to start one, I would be tagged as a white rescuer. That's black. So I could. For me, the thing that helps my relationship most is asking questions. And I do have a carefulness with my words, but I make them aware. I'm not intentionally, but there are times when I can make them aware that I know these issues are there. If I'm selling a motorcycle to this black guy, he was a drill instructor in the military. He's about 6'5", 6'6", and we're looking at this nice bike, and he said, I just don't think it fits me. And I said, we can change the seat. Be able to change it. He doesn't fit me. And I said, yeah. Not a tall boy. Just by saying it that way, he caught that, the boy emphasis, and just kind of smiled. And we've got this phenomenal relationship, except one thing. He took a picture of the bike, posted it on Facebook, and his mother bought it for him from a different dealer. Other than that, I still run into him at times. Other than that, we just have this, but it's just kind of a disarming thing. It's like selling a bike to a Muslim during Ramadan. I said, okay, this is the time where we celebrate. We can't drink. I said, I know that. This has nothing to do with drinking. And that gave me the door to say, hey, I'm a follower of Isa al-Masih. I just go to that little connection point there. But I think sometimes asking the question and treating them as normal. There are times in some situations I will go an extra step. So, motorcycle training class, we have a highway patrol officer going to ride a motorcycle. We show in cleavage. Okay. And as rider coaches, we try to be encouraging, we try to be positive, hey, you're really getting it. And that's when I talk to everybody. What age they are, what they look like, anything. Piercing tattoos bother me. I got concerned, what if she thinks I'm talking this way to her? Other coaching points and stuff. I said, I'm talking to you. That thought went to your mind about differently. But I just disarmed her. I'd rather just disarm. I don't know how, but somehow I'm comfortable in that environment and they recognize it. An all-black church just becoming, and this guy comes up to me for the service and says, you're the guest speaker. Kicked me out, that's what they mean. You just want to kind of go over. My daughter went to Motomod and she called me up and she said, Dad, everybody was so friendly, like they all knew I was a visitor. I said, well, yeah. But it's recognizing, and when they said, identify it. So we get Stephen into our family, and I want my daughter to know I'm so excited that he adopted Stephen and that he's welcome in our family. I wanted to get him the first Christmas present. Baby's first Christmas. I went to 6 or 7 different places, and every baby's first Christmas, it was either a white child or it was too cutesy for me to buy. I gave up. The day before Christmas, I'm walking to a mall to pick up a Christmas card for a birthday card for Holly. And tell why her parents named her that. And I see this kiosk, and they've got these, get these names put on these ornaments, for kids. And I walk over and think, oh, I might as well look one more time. I see this little dark face in this snowflake, Santa Claus. Now I'm jaded. So there's some of my black friends in Michigan, they're going, you're learning. I said, I looked at it, and I thought, is that a black kid, or is that just a white kid with it? I looked at the other, and I thought, I was so excited to find a black Christmas tree. Listen, we've gone to Frankenmuth, which is like the motherlode of Christmas things, and we found only 3 things that were black. One looked like a cartoon character black. The second one I don't remember. The third one, my daughter said, that looked like the angel from hell. Because my wife did buy that and took off the hair and pasted our granddaughter's hair on it. Now she looks like a good angel, So this is the ruler. We went to Brooklyn Tabernacle to see if they had any Bible story books or books for kids that had multiracial. And that time they didn't. It's like, man, this is hard. So I'm so excited to go around. I go, this is what I want. And they said, what name do you want? I said, Stephen with a V. And the lady looks up at me and says, well, then do you want one with a blue cap instead of a pink cap? I was so excited to see the black face, I didn't know it had a pink cap. I had to go right to the blue cap and bring it back. And I can tell them the stories to my friends, and they realize I'm trying to learn. And I'm not trying to come in like a white. The one church, black church on the east side of Harrisburg, the first time they were sending a missionary, they called me. And they signed an armor bearer to me for the day. Cool. Armor bearer stayed with me all day. Prayed for me. If I needed to drink of water, he included me drink of water. It was good. I spoke, and then afterwards we went to a restaurant where we talked about cross-cultural experience. At a cafe. At a very rubbish. I don't know why, but was it Justin who said, God loves all as he loves me? Think quickly, let me just give you some websites. In disciple making, most disciple making studies will show there were 4 phases of Jesus' disciple making ministry. Come and see, which is like building relationships, sharing the gospel. Come and follow, that's when they're starting to become committed followers of Christ. Come and be with, that's where they're being trained. Then remain in me, which is when they go out and make disciples themselves. Dan Spader recently, it's one of those times he was talking and I realized what he'd said and thought about it. So I said that you really haven't made a disciple until that disciple makes a disciple. That really struck me. Often when we teach these things, like this is what you're supposed to do, and I'm the person who has this concrete kind of thinking. I'm like, show me how. Okay, the first thing I'm going to give you for a website, you go to evantel.org, evantel.org. They have a training program in there on how to share your faith. 4 lessons. Download a study guide that you can print off of have these brief videos. It's not like watching an hour-long video. Video is going to be broken up with little test questions, like a final exam on each section of it. But Evantel's method of presenting the gospel, the simplest, the clearest, one that's according and long and go short, one that I use all the time ever since. Simple to
2 L's or 1 L?
2 L's. I think it's 2 L's. Simple form of it, I did this at Carol last month. Bible is bad news, good news. Bad news is all about us. Good news all about God. Bad news is all done things wrong. You have bad news is pay for us. Good news is paid the penalty. Good news is all we have to do. That's simple. All right, so somebody comes to know Christ as Savior. Now you want to get him founded and moving along through. Follow me and be with me stage. That's where you go, cbmc.com.
Say it again.
CBMC, Charlie Baker, Michael Charlie. Charlie Bravo. WBE. What are you doing? But the best way to go is to go advanced.com. Sign in, get a login. I'm going to get on their name. There you find Operation Timothy. You can order the materials, Amazon, print on demand. We don't have a story, I don't do this. Or you can use the electronic version. Three volumes developed in conjunction with navigators. Electronic versions from building. But I can have on my screen what they're looking at on their screen. And I can actually bookmark it. What I'm going to do is Operation Timothy with the guy, send him a link from off that website. And then when I'm going on my screen, I open up my Timothy's and I click on him and it takes me right back to where we are in the study. Open-ended questions. The first book you look at and say, well, that's a pretty simple thing. I think pastors, we're thinking about using this in our church. I think pastors who book one starts out with, what's the purpose of life? I'm listening to pastors, glad we're starting right now. Book 2 gets a little bit more involved. Book 3 really gets involved. At the end of book 2 is where it talks about sharing your faith. But if we're taking a person, square one, and moving them through the process, there. So now you get this part of remain in me, and that's where I've made a disciple fully until they make a disciple. How do we train people to make disciples? Go back to advanced.cb.com. Click on Becoming a Spiritual Reproducer. And you can go on Amazon and get the workbook for it, or you can download it there, but all of it's there. The video clips, lessons. I've been doing this with the team over in Lancaster and Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and we're all on our computers. We've got the same page we're watching on Zoom. We've got our study guides in front of us one way or another. And it talks about understanding why this is important and how to do it. One other thing to add, again, this is on cbmc.com, advanced living proof adventure. Thursday night, I will show you a little intro clip of Living Proof. Living Proof is about lifestyle evangelism. In this, and it's a series of 12 lessons, video clips that are very challenging. About 3 I like to use in sessions like this, but one. To challenge people that we can build relationships, give us opportunity to put stone in the street, raise the flag, burn a hearing. Got a men's retreat and you want somebody burning a hearing in the marketplace. I've got 3 lessons. It's a great equipment. It's all free. All free. So that you're teaching people how to build relationships, how to share their faith. You're helping them grow individually and teaching them how to help somebody else grow. And those are resources that are online, free, and great resources. Those are CTHC, but good. I run the clip tomorrow night. I remember the first time Joan and I spoke. She's not controlling like that, but she does help me get my slides straight. I said, so you've seen this one. No, let me see it again. This is so good. Got there and watch it. It's going to challenge you. Hey, thanks. This hasn't been painless at all. That didn't come out right, did it?
No.
They said they want me around here, so you're welcome. You see Madam Bailey wants to sit down and talk more. Here to help you guys. Appreciate it. I have a lot of friends. Mike, what was our time at Berkeley?
Father, we're grateful for spending a few moments here with Brother Tony, Lord. I pray that you would prepare us, you help us to see the darkness, but also see the opportunities that lie before us in faith. As I remember when Father said, praise the Lord, what marvelous times we live in. Father, give us strength to meet these challenges. To go forth as train us, as you lead us, as you guide us, and as you give